Introduce yourself first.
All right. Thank you very much once again for the opportunity given to me to have a session this afternoon with your students in India.
So it's
My
our
name
pleasure.
Yes, my name is Tim Moop Richard Wonsibe. I am a biology teacher and I also double as the head of science department in Saviligu Senior High School. I've been teaching for the past 18 years. I hold a Master of Philosophy degree in Community Health and Development and a Bachelor of Science degree in Applied Biology. I also hold a Teacher Certificate A from Bagabaga Teacher Training College here in Ghana. So this is what I can say briefly about myself. I have a slide that I may show to you.
Okay.
Hello, sir. I'm Lohita Girija. I am a 9th grader. Would you allow me to ask a question?
All right.
Provide an example of a time when you had to adapt your teaching style to suit the needs of your students.
Please share.
Yes, I think I need the.
I have allowed you to share the screen. You can do it.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, it is visible.
Okay, so as far as thank you very much. So as far as the adaptation of a particular methodology that I will assist my students to write examination, there are several of them I was taught in the teacher training college, and there is no single particular methodology that is superior over the other. However, I employ the student-centered and activity-oriented method of teaching my students, because this particular method gives them the opportunity to be able to interact with the teaching materials as well as interact among themselves, and they bring out the concepts on their own. I usually remain in the background as a facilitator and give them the opportunity, because I don't consider my students to have blank minds. I know they have a lot of potentials, and it is now left onto me to allow these students to interact with the teaching and learning materials and among themselves so that they can bring out the concepts on their own. And you see, I have adopted this particular method because it allows my students to develop wide variety of skills, ranging from leadership skills, communication skills, analytical skills, listening skills, teamwork, observing, experimentation, as well as building relationship. So these are the reasons that make me adopt this particular teaching methods for my students.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Radhika. Radhika, it's your turn.
Yes, sir. Hello, sir.
Yes, I'm with you.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing good, and you?
I'm also fine, sir. My name is Radhika. Can I ask you a question, sir?
Sure, you can.
What is your teaching style?
Can you come again, please?
What is your teaching style?
Okay, my teaching style. All right, I think that is what I already used earlier and explained to your colleague. The teaching style I use in delivering my lesson is basically the student-centered and activity-oriented method, as you can see in the slide. When I'm going to deliver a lesson, I ensure that an enabling environment is created in the classroom setting. Because if you are to start teaching and you don't condition your classroom very well, you make it very fragile. Matter, they will not actively participate in your lesson. So I usually create an enabling and conducive atmosphere in the classroom so that my students will be at ease to flow with me when I'm delivering the lesson. Another thing I do is to prepare them psychologically, because whenever they step foot into the classroom, some of them already come from their homes with a lot of problems in their minds. So if you don't psychologically prepare them and you start delivering your lesson, they may not be actively participating. Quite apart from this, a lot of students have certain misconceptions about certain subject areas as being difficult. So prior to my lesson delivery, I usually psyche my students up by demystifying the notion they hold about a particular subject, especially the subject I'm teaching, biology, as being difficult, so that I prepare their minds psychologically to be ready to learn whatever concepts I have with them. Besides, when I'm also teaching, I try as much as possible to relate the biological concepts I teach my students to real life situations using practical examples in our immediate environment, so that the students can easily relate whatever they are learning to real life situations within their environment. Another important style I employ in my teaching is to diagnose the problem of students even before I start delivering the lesson, because I need to know the level of understanding of my students in the concept I am about to teach. So I will first of all diagnose them by using questions or other appropriate methods, so that I will determine their level before I can even start teaching them the concept. Another strategy I also employ is to assess my students regularly using different assessment techniques, because if you don't assess them, you will not be able to understand their level of understanding in the concepts you have taught so far. So I assess them regularly, and based on the problems I uncover from their assessment, I can now meet some students one-on-one and discuss their problems with them so that they are able to cope up with the learning process. Apart from that, I also meet some in groups. If I realize that you have common problems, I can decide to meet you in a group to give you counseling as to how your problem can be dealt with amicably. I also employ holistic teaching methods for my students. I give them holistic training. I don't just give them knowledge to pass examination, but I train them to fit well into society, so that when they pass their examination, they also have certain moral values that will allow them to be able to fit well into society. So I give them training of the mind, training of the hands, and training of the heart, so that they can fit well into society. Thank you very much.
Wow, I must say that your students are so lucky to have you as the teacher. So that means even though your students are secondary, but you are giving them a life training for the rest of life. So it's a great experience for your students, for us too. Subramanian Srinivas, over to you.
Yes, sir. Hello, sir.
Hi.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing good, and you?
I'm I am doing well, sir. My question is, which is the most important quality of a biology teacher?
Okay, what I consider to be the most important quality of me as a biology teacher is leadership. There are several other qualities that a biology teacher is expected to possess, but I see leadership quality as paramount because if you really possess the qualities of a leader, you will be in the best position to ensure discipline is your hallmark, punctuality is your hallmark, paying attention to details will also be one of your attributes as a leader. And you see, if you look at leadership qualities, a leader is expected to show the way to the followers. So once I am in the position of a biology teacher, it is expected of me to guide and direct my students on the right path. Just as I mentioned earlier, they are not just to be on the consuming side of knowledge, but they should be in the position to even use this knowledge they are acquiring from me as a biology teacher. So if I'm demonstrating my leadership capacity, I should be in the right position to ensure that the knowledge I give to my students is well utilized. Apart from that, a leader should be very innovative. That is why I chose it as a paramount quality of what? A biology teacher. You can't continue to do things the same way and expect different results. So if you want to demonstrate your capacity as a leader, you have to be innovative. You have to try to do things in different ways. Try to look for different strategies you can employ in your teaching so that you are able to give the best to your students. Apart from that, a leader should be a continuous learner, and that should be a very good attribute of a biology teacher. Society is dynamic. Things keep changing every day. So if you don't make yourself a continuous learner, it means that you can be operating in the past. Meanwhile, there are a lot of new trends in the system currently. You are supposed to make it available to your students. So being a good leader, you will have to be a continuous learner. A good leader also gives training to the followers. So being in the position of a teacher, it is expected of me to ensure that my students are well trained, not only in academics, but in all other phases of life. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much
Thank you,
once
sir.
again for giving a elaborate details about the qualities of biology teacher. So I must say again that your students and your community is so lucky to have a great teacher like you. Mamata, over to you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Hello, sir.
Yes, I'm with you.
My name is Namata. I am a sixth grader. Can I ask one question, sir?
Okay, you can ask. I'm ready.
What is the role of a teacher in teaching biology?
Okay, as far as the role of a teacher in teaching biology is concerned, I prepare my scheme of work, and the scheme of work serves as a roadmap to what I'm expected to carry out in a semester. You know, there is a popular saying that if you don't know where you are going, any road can lead you there. So prior to the beginning of every semester, I have to consult my syllabus and other relevant resource materials like the teacher's guide, the textbooks, and even go online and prepare my scheme of work. And as I mentioned, this one serves as a guide to me as to the number of topics, the content, the teaching and learning materials I'm supposed to use, the type of assessments, as well as the number of assessments I want to conduct with this. I prepare my lesson notes or lesson plan as a biology teacher because this lesson plan is also serving as a guide to me when I step foot into the classroom so that I know specifically where I am starting and where I am ending. And this lesson notes will also give me a guide as to the appropriate methodologies I'm expected to employ during the course of my lesson delivery so that I am able to achieve the objectives I have set for my students within that particular lesson. I do the lesson delivery itself, that is the main teaching as a biology teacher. Then I also assess my students, that is continuous assessment using class exercises, quizzes, tests, projects, as well as assignments. I also play a supervisory role as a biology teacher because I need to monitor class attendance of my students. I need to monitor them during examinations. And whenever they are also carrying out activities in the science laboratory, it is my responsibility to be with them and monitor every activity they embark upon so that whenever challenges arise, I will be available to address those challenges to them. I also monitor my students to clean the classrooms, the laboratories, as well as the school compounds. Apart from this, I take part in departmental meetings and conferences as a biology teacher because these are the meetings we use and plan activities for, things that we use to share ideas as teachers on the best practices we can employ to give the best to our students. Also, I take my students to also go to the field but we visit certain learning center practical components in the field. Again, I engage the parents of my students to discuss about their welfare. As a biology teacher, a lot of students in class have variety of problems, and it is my responsibility to study my students carefully and diagnose some of these problems. It could be academic, it could be psychological, it could be financial, it could be any form of problem. So when you find these challenges and you discuss with the student and it doesn't yield the appropriate results, you have to extend it to the parents. So I discuss it either in person or by phone calls so that we can talk about the welfare of the kids. Apart from this, I organize orientation sessions for my students on best learning practices, examination, and career opportunities. Some of the students, they are very good, but they really don't know the best strategies they can employ during learning. So it is my duty as a teacher to give them insights as to the best ways they can learn. Apart from that, Whenever they write their examination and I mark the scripts, I usually realize some of them are very knowledgeable, but they have issues with the best way to present answers in order to score the needed marks. So I organize these orientations to give them the nitty-gritty of writing examination so that they don't only employ the knowledge they use, but they employ it by abiding by certain examination principles so that they are able to score higher marks. I also give them career counseling so that they will know that as they are studying science in school, these are available opportunities for them in higher level of institutions for further studies or even in the job market. Another important thing I also want you to take note of is that biology is a natural science. It is a science that deals with life. And for this matter, a biology teacher should be an advocate for preservation of living organisms. So I advise my students a lot on how we can preserve life because our area has to do with life. That will be protecting endangered species because we have some species of organisms now who are just at the verge of being wiped out of the ecological system. So if you don't play that advocacy role as a biology teacher, so that your students will learn how to preserve resources, you will not be doing your environment good. Besides, I also advocate for environmental protection and conservation of natural resources as a biologist. So I employ my students to engage themselves in tree planting, grow ornamental plants on the school compound so that we can beautify the school environment. And again, these plants will be serving as carbon sinks to purify our environment. And it's not only limited to the school environment. I encourage them to practice this in their homes because the very role these things will play for us on campus is the same way it will play for them in their homes. Now, as a biology teacher too, I involve myself in health and reproductive issues. As a biology teacher, I admonish my students to employ personal and environmental hygiene so that they can promote good health among themselves in the school as well as their communities. Again, I engage my students and advise them to refrain from certain practices like drug abuse and sexual promiscuity that can be detrimental to their well-being. Because if you allow them to engage in these unhealthy practices, they can result into teenage pregnancies as well as school dropout. So I just don't limit my role to teaching and learning, but I go further and do a lot of other things I feel will prepare my students on a positive path. Thank you.
So it looks like you are a versatile genius. I think you deal with every aspect of a student, whether it is a personal or academic or anything else. So, you are a versatile genius. I think you deal with everything, but most of the teachers, unfortunately, they try to limit themselves to be the person who only deals with the academics rather than the other issues. And
Exactly.
so I have no doubt that you are so great, and your students are so lucky to have you a great
Thank
leader
you.
and as a teacher. So who can ask
Thank
the
you.
next question?
Sir, can I?
Yes.
Sure, you can. Yes, you can.
Yes, sir. This is Jaishna Likita, 6th grader. I would like to ask one question, sir.
Okay, carry on.
What are
What are some of the most important skills for a biology teacher to have?
Okay, as far as the skills a biology teacher should have is concerned, there are so many of them I have listed here. We have observing skills, measuring skills, analytical skills, critical thinking skills, excellent communication skills, prediction skills, resource interpretation, then emotional intelligence skills. There are several other skills a biology teacher is expected to possess, but I just enumerated these few. And out of this, I would like to just talk briefly about the observation skill. I consider observing skill to be a central skill upon which other skills can be developed. As a biology teacher, when I am delivering my lesson, I am supposed to make maximum use of my observing skills. Because if I'm observing my students critically during the course of the lesson delivery, I will be able to determine when fatigue has set in. Because if you are teaching and you don't observe, some of the students will become tired and they no longer even show interest in the lesson. Some may be sleeping. Others may also engage themselves in activities that are outside the teaching and learning process. So observing is very, very important. And if you look at it, I've been telling my students always that many of them are only seeing, but they don't observe. And it is a daily song I sing into their ears that whenever they step foot out of their dormitories, by the time they will get to the classrooms, they would have been able to observe certain things happening in their immediate environment. So I encourage my students always to use this skill because it is very paramount. And you see, observing skills is not just limited to the use of the eye. It involves the employment of the other senses. Your sense of feel, your sense of smell, your sense of touch, that's the sense of feel as I mentioned. You need to employ all these senses within your environment. For instance, if I'm in the classroom teaching and I don't observe critically by the use of my senses, certain unusual noise would be emerging in the classroom or in the science laboratory. And as a result of the fact that I pay keen interest to observing, I'll be able to hear that something unusual is happening. So in that sense, you'll be able to take a quick action to salvage the situation. You also need the observation skills as a teacher because it enables you to give your students in-depth information about certain phenomena. Conducting of experiments is very paramount in our study as far as biology is concerned. And whenever you are carrying out these experiments, you have to use your observing skills very well. Otherwise, the rest of the information or data you are supposed to obtain from this experiment, you will not be able to get it in accuracy. Now, the observing skills is also very vital in detecting some faults, just as I mentioned earlier on, in your environment, so that you are able to take a quick action to salvage the situation. You see, if students want to be very creative, they have to use their observing skills very well. Let me just cite an instance, and they may ask you to describe certain phenomena as far as English language is concerned. And if you watch out carefully, students who take keen interest in observing phenomena that is happening or that are happening in their environment, they are very creative. And when it comes to the time of describing certain situations, they are always very good at doing that. You see, if you also observe how patterns are occurring in your environment, it allows you to make certain educated guesses and assumptions. And in the long run, you are able to develop other important skills like critical thinking and logic. Because when you observe a particular pattern in your environment, it doesn't end there. You will begin to ask yourself certain questions as to why or how it is happening the way it is. Then you begin to raise possible answers to yourself. This will further lead you to conduct experiments in order to ascertain whether the guesses you were making were correct or wrong. And you see, when you are doing this, you are portraying your skills as what? A scientist. I want to cite this particular example for you that happened some time back in the school. I was seated with some other teachers under a neem tree, and an agama lizard dominance. One agama lizard is expected to service several female ones within its habitat. So if another male agama lizard is coming into that habitat, the one that was already living there tries to protect it, and that's what we call the territorial dominance. So this agama lizard was protecting its territory by fighting the other male agama lizards. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm really sorry to interrupt. I'm really sorry to interrupt you. Actually, I'm running a free Zoom session at this moment, and this particular Zoom session can allow us only for 40 minutes. So I request you
Okay.
reconnect again once this session is completed, so that we can extend this session. Students are requested.
Okay.
And if you haven't
Okay.
asked any questions, please reconnect so that we can continue this session.
Okay, I will do that. So I was saying that when this agama lizard was exercising the territorial dominance, I sat with colleague teachers who did not actually, they were seeing, but they were not observing. I was just talking about the scenario of the agama. Are you okay, please? Can you hear me, please?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I was talking about this observing skills the agama lizard was exhibiting to really know that something was happening. So I sent for my students, they were in the classroom, and I asked that they should come over because I had already taught them that topic. And when they came over, I just made them to stand and observe what was going on. And some of them were able to tell me that the male agama lizard was actually exhibiting territorial dominance. So you realize that even though I was seated there with fellow teachers, they probably could have seen the agama lizard fighting others, but they didn't observe critically to really know what was going on. So as a biology teacher, you really need to be very, very observant about things that are going on in your environment. Now, another thing I want to talk about has to do with you having or me having excellent communication skills as a biology.
It looks like we have lost connection.
teacher, because communication is very something about it some time ago, and they use where we have recipients and then the recipient's ability to decode the information that has been sent to him or her. So as a biology teacher, the way and manner in which you package your information and transmit to your students is very important, because if you communicate to them and they receive and they are not able to understand, it means that communication has not taken place. So you have to simplify the information, try to relate it with real life situations so that whatever you are giving to them, they are able to comprehend it. Can you still see my screen being shared?
Yes.
Good. So the packaging and transmission of this information to the learners is very, very, very crucial. And as a biology teacher, sometimes when you even step foot into the classroom, the way and manner in which you talk to your students can bring some amount of timidity in some of them, and in the long run, it is going to affect their participation in the lesson. And remember, communication is not just verbal. You can use other non-verbal means to communicate with your students. So your facial expressions and a whole lot of things the students will see in you will be very crucial during the course of the lesson delivery. So I knew as a biology teacher, as far as the emotional intelligence is concerned, if you enter the classroom as a teacher, you should have the ability to perceive the mood of your students in the classroom. I mentioned earlier on that some of the students come to school already carrying a lot of problems in their mind. So if you are not emotionally sensitive as a teacher, you may come in and deliver your lesson and a lot of carry to the school instead of concentrating on your lesson. So you should be able to put yourself in the shoes of your students, feel what they may feel, so that you are able to put the needed remedy to salvage the situation. Otherwise, you may just be killing your students softly during the course of the lesson delivery instead of giving them what they want. So these are the few elaborations I can make as far as
So it looks like we have, yes, it looks like we have a poor network connectivity.
communication and then emotional intelligence is concerned. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And we have one more question. I think it would be a last question, I think. Sahiti, would you like to ask a question?
Sure. Is it okay now?
Yes, sir. Hello, sir. My name is Sahiti. I'm an 8th grader from Z.P.H.S Ilavaram. Here, my question is, what are the challenges in teaching biology?
Okay, thank you very much. As far as the teaching of biology is concerned, one of the challenges I face as a biology teacher is the perception some students have about the subject. They perceive it as a very difficult subject, and for that matter, they don't show keen interest in the learning of the biology. But as I mentioned earlier on, I don't just leave this problem to gain grounds in my students. Prior to even teaching them the biological concepts, I try as much as possible to psychologically prepare them. I let them understand that whatever concepts we are going to be learning in biology are very much related to our real life situations. And if they want to really enjoy the study of the subject, they have to do situational learning, whereby whenever we are learning particular concepts in the biology, they should try to see the kind of things they can easily relate those concepts to in their immediate environment. So when I do this, I make my students really have a picture of the subject as something that is easy for them to learn. And I don't just say it, I practice it myself, because during the course of my teaching, I do a lot of real life relations to the biological concepts. Let me just give you a practical example of what I've been telling students. You've gone in to write examination, and there is a question that requires you to mention maybe 3 characteristics of a sick animal. You don't need to have been taught this concept, or you don't need to have read it before you can provide answers to this particular question. 1, you are a human being, a first-class animal, and you have fallen sick before. So if you put yourself in the shoes of the animal, you realize that when you are sick, you lose appetite. You don't feel like eating. You lose weight. You are not very active when you are sick. So if you situate yourself in the shoe of this animal, you realize that the answers will just be forthcoming. You don't need to open a book, or a teacher doesn't have to tell you this before you can get the answer. So this is what I do as a teacher. Another thing too is that biology is actually a technical subject with a lot of principles. However, many students find it very difficult to obey these biological principles. I usually tell them every subject has its language, and biology is not an exception. If you go in to write biology examination, you can be the most intelligent biology student, but once you fail to stick to the biological principles, I can assure you, you may either perform poorly or you will fail outrightly. So when you point out these biological principles to students, a lot of them will not pay heed to it. What accounts for this? Many of them are exposed to certain materials that are not actually obeying these biological principles. And once they've gotten hold of such materials, and you, the teacher, you are now telling them that this particular thing has not been done as expected, they don't believe what you tell them. They tend to believe what they've seen in books instead of what you are telling them. I'm privileged to be an assistant examiner with the West African Examinations Council, Ghana. Apart from that, I also attend a lot of professional development training programs. We get exposures to a lot of changing trends in the biological principles. So when you bring these new ideas and you share to your students, or share it, yes, to your students, some of them will still, end of the day, it affects them in their examination. So it's a very big challenge as far as the teaching of the subject is concerned. Another thing has to do with inadequate teaching and learning aids. I try as much as possible to improvise a lot of teaching aids to enable my students to understand biological concepts. But there are some models we also need to have them in the biology lab. These models are not available, and it stems from financial problems and what have you, because if you request for funds to get these materials, it may not be difficult, easy for them to release the funds for you to get them. Another thing has to do with inadequate tech tools. We don't have our biology lab and other science labs well equipped with tech tools that can facilitate our learning process. So there are times we may be struggling to understand certain simple concepts that we could have gotten it very easily if we're having the technology tools to facilitate the learning of those concepts. Another issue has to do with the caliber of students who are admitted into the science department to do biology and other electives. There are some of them who have very poor background knowledge in the sciences. And when they come, you have to build them right from the scratch. As I mentioned, I usually conduct my diagnosis to know the level of understanding of my students even before I start teaching the concepts. So when I do these diagnoses, I'll get to know that so many of them background in the science is very poor. And others too will not even qualify to be in the science class, but they will still be admitted. Very difficult for them to cope with the program scientism. Some students always want to stay away. One affects me a lot in my teaching because when you teach certain concepts in their absence and they come later, you may be building upon the initial concept you taught, and once they were not present in class, they don't really understand what exactly you are doing. Now, inadequate expertise in the use of technology tools is also affecting me in my lesson delivery. Ghana, as a country, we didn't start on good grounds as far as technology is concerned. Even as we were having our training at the colleges of education to come out and be teachers, we were not even exposed on the use of technology tools in teaching and learning. So as I talk to you now, I have a challenge as a teacher in how I can even use the technology tools if they are readily available in my lab today to use. So it's another challenge I also face as a teacher. Now, poor attitude of students towards practical lessons is another key factor. A lot of the students, they don't show so much interest when it comes to doing biology practical lesson. So it's either they will not come to class, or when they come, their participation in the practical lessons is very, very minimal. You have to do a lot of work to be able to break things. We also have limited internet connectivity. You may be teaching and you have to show them certain concepts. I have to use my mobile phone, go online, and I have to be moving from one student to another showing them. But if we're having wide connectivity on campus with digitalized biology labs, you could just click the link and whatever information you want to show to your students will be displayed on a large screen for them to see at a blow. So because sometimes I have to use my mobile phone or laptop to go around and show each of them, it is time consuming. So these are some of the challenges I encounter as a biology teacher. Thank you.
Okay, thank you